1% possibility, 99% challenge, right? Even with the slightest amount of possibility, there's no other obstacle, no challenge, as long as you keep your mind focused on what you want to achieve in life. I had stepped on a mound where supposedly was supposed to be cleared, unfortunately was not, and a large explosion commenced. After about, I would say 40, 50 seconds, I came to senses and I started to understand what had happened. To this day, my own personal motivation and inspiration of seeing through adversities, me doing what I do on a daily basis, that is my primary motivation. I'm totally independent. I can go out and play golf. I have a great job, right? That is my primary motivation.
Introducing Deputy Secretary of Veterans Defense Affairs of Commonwealth, Virginia, Jason Park.
Hello, everybody. I'm really honored and humbled to be here at the Korean Community Center. 1% possibility, 99% challenge, right? I asked myself, how does my own personal journey thus far really allude to that? Even with the slightest amount of possibility, there's no other obstacle, no challenge, as long as you keep your mind focused on what you want to achieve in life. Myself, a little bit more physical than many others. You can go through financial issues, family issues. Everybody has challenges. Really, I do hope that through my own story, you all can gain some wisdom and some life lessons about how none of that, you focus on the things that really do matter. You really aren't upset about the things that don't, right? So I'll go into my Korean American upbringing. Many of you young high schoolers, maybe even younger, Korean American, just like I was. A lot of how Korean culture and Korean values mesh with American culture and American values. I grew up as a military brat, right? So we lived the majority of my time growing up in Korea, in Yongsan, on the U.S. Army military base. My father was in the military, so we moved around a lot. So we also had that challenge on top of having to resettle to multiple locations and making new friends everywhere where I go, right? But when you look at the culture that I was brought up in Korea as an American, I lived on an Army post. I did all of my extracurricular activities, which I know many of you probably in this room do a lot of extracurricular activities, which is worthwhile. Those were my fellow Korean American brothers who joined in the same class, and we all played soccer as part of that same class. It's important to do. One thing that I'll share is being a well-rounded person is very important and will take you far. It quite simply took me far, and I'm a 34-year-old adult now, and I've spent time in corporate America, spent time in the military, I spent time overseas in Afghanistan. I spent time on Capitol Hill, working for a key senator not too long ago. So it all starts, everything happens for a reason, and everything that you do, no matter how hard it may be, is done for a reason. So when you look at, going back to what I'm looking at, when I'm trying to explain the Korean American values and how I was brought up as a Korean American was near and dear to me, and it's something that has shaped me into who I am today, and quite frankly has shaped me through my military service and through sustained injuries that I did. Spent 4 years at West Point and grew a lot through those times. And I do think the college life, and I know many of you are anticipating what it's going to be like. For me, it's very atypical, right? I went to military school. However, being put in a situation where you really have to balance your academics, your physical fitness, and all your military requirements, it is meant to shape you into a well-rounded person. So going back to what I said, in terms of doing extracurriculars, being part of your student government, NHS,
being part of a sports team. West Point is really looking for those types of individuals that are well-rounded, that can thrive in those settings as well. So I ultimately at West Point or in the Army, if you go ROTC as well, you usually select a specialty. MOS is what they call it. My specialty MOS was field artillery, and that is categorized as a combat arms branch. So that, along with infantry, your typical foot soldiers, field artillery, armor, those are boots on the ground, and many, if you do branch that MOS, you're typically going into combat, you're getting put into combat units, if that makes sense. And I always knew I wanted to do that, right? And a lot of my friends at the time, again, the relationships and bonds that you form while in college, arguably both in a military environment or in a civilian environment, are going to be friends for the rest of your life. And so right when we graduated, it's almost a blitz from there, because when you graduate from the academy or you go into ROTC, you are automatically commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army. And you start your actual service, and you are pinned on as an officer of the United States Army. And that is quite a big deal. After I graduated West Point, they sent me to airborne school, a school where the military teaches you to parachute out of airplanes. I did that, and then I had the honor and privilege of attending the U.S. Army's Ranger School. And for those that aren't familiar, Ranger School is a very grueling, arduous school, arguably one of the most grueling that the U.S. government and military has to offer, where they put you through 60 days of limited sleep, limited food, and they rotate you in through multiple scenarios that are the worst case scenarios, and they assess you on how you lead in those situations. Ranger School, they really put a lot on you at Ranger School, and they demand a lot from you. Fast forward, after I graduated Ranger School, I was stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington, and in Washington State, and actually was unaware that until I did get a phone call from my future to-be boss. Hey, you better get up here quick, because I was at the time at Fort Benning, Georgia, which is where Ranger School is. And he said, we're about to deploy. So I deployed to Afghanistan. And that was a period of a lot of excitement for me personally. For those that have served in the room, that have donned the uniform, understand that a deployment is an opportunity to really showcase everything you've trained for to the day. And we've trained hard, right, with our units. We trained hard at NTC, which is the National Training Center in Fort Irwin, prior to deployment. And essentially, it's what I went to West Point to do, to go to combat, to serve amongst fellow Americans, and do good, right? And so we deployed to southern Afghanistan in October of 2012, and had a great time there. You know, fast forward 2.5 months, we were on a routine patrol right outside of a village. And if you can imagine, and where we operated, literally the terrain was exactly, it looked like the desert. There were a lot of grape rows, a lot of walls, and the threat of IEDs were very high. And those that are not familiar with what an IED is, an improvised explosive device, essentially a mine that's dug in the ground. So December 12, 2012 was a typical routine patrol, and you can imagine, because of the threat of IEDs, when we did trek outside of the wire, as we called it, if we were out in a combat zone, we cannot go very far very quickly because of the threat of wherever you step, it could be an IED. So we operated always in a straight line. We were very well spaced out, and I was the third guy in the file. You know, they have a clear path where the lead guy has equipment to detect IEDs, which is not 100% accurate. The second guy, who is a squad leader, that's marking off where the guy in front of him had cleared, and then I was right behind him. And as we were operating and getting close to the village, I had stepped on a mound where supposedly was supposed to be cleared. Unfortunately, was not, and a large explosion commenced. After about, I would say 40, 50 seconds, I came to senses and I started to understand what had happened. And then your body goes into immediate survival mode. And I was fully conscious throughout the incident. Not many people are. Whenever I would like to say that I think after going through such a traumatic event like that, I do know that pain is different and everybody processes pain differently. And a lot of it is mental, I feel like. But my reaction to it was anger more than anything, and a thought that nobody else hopefully was as significantly injured as I was, knowing that I had stepped on that IED. Fast forward, I talk about how much I valued the military service, and culminating up to the point where I was injured, the people that I was with, and I explained why the military life, the bonds that you form are so irreplaceable, and they're family and brothers and sisters, is because of that day and the acts of those that were near me and around me, and the first aid that they rendered, and applying my tourniquets, stopping my bleeding, and calling the medevac immediately after it happened, and me being able to get out successfully. So I remember all the way up to the point of getting into the hospital at Kandahar Air Force Base. And I woke up after my first stabilizing surgery that evening and phoned my parents, or my dad in particular, and he was not able to share with my mom at the time that I was injured due to the fact that they had relayed your son had been involved in a combat-related incident. He is currently in surgery. He is stabilized. We cannot disclose the extent of his injuries at the time, but we'll keep you posted. And so hence begins the journey of overcoming adversity and never giving up. You know, I'll be lying if I said, having gone through something like that as an athlete, as a soccer player, as a kid at the time. I was a kid, man. I was 21, 22 when that injury happened. That you go through a little bit of a dark time. In the hospital, you have a lot of time to think and reflect and say, wow, I lost my legs. What am I going to do with my life now? Right? And what's left for me to do? But without a doubt, as you can see on the top left, is me going through my recovery. And, you know, as I mentioned, I'm an athletic person. I love to be out and about, and I love to play sports. I wanted to get out of a wheelchair. I wanted to heal as quickly as I can. And the motivation and inspiration that I receive from fellow wounded warriors and their families, we all lift each other up, right? We all tell each other, and we actually joke. And I'll share this one tidbit of a fellow wounded warrior who actually was not just a double amputee, but he had lost all 4 of his limbs. So both arms, both legs, but he has prosthetics on his arm, and he has 2 prosthetics on his leg, and he walks into my hospital room, and he has a very, very, very positive personality and says, you know, hey sir, you only lost 2 legs? You'll be fine. That's a paper cut compared to what I have, right? But you know what? I'm thankful. I'm happy to be here. I'm glad that I'm here. I have my wife, my daughter. You know, it's all downhill from here for you. Don't complain. Just try to be better than me, right? So again, we pull each other up and we inspire each other. That really motivated me, that interaction with a quadruple amputee. I then told myself, you know, there's not one activity that I cannot do. I was very fortunate to have been injured in today's day and age, in that time, actually, in 2012, because of how advanced prosthetics technology is. I'm standing up here, and if I didn't show you or tell you that I was a double amputee, I guarantee you many of you would not have guessed. I'm walking maybe a little bit kind of, but you won't be able to notice. And I can't tell you how many times in a professional setting where people have no idea that I'm a amputee. And in conversation, I would disclose that I am, and they would be very, very shocked. And they would say, "Oh, that's unbelievable." All of those things, again, happen for a reason. And I do think it all goes back to my Korean American upbringing and my military time, what I trained to do for the military, and then going through that adversity and coming out of it. So, I could go on and on about, the many things that I've been through. I do have to say, though, having gone through something like this injury to me, quite frankly, looking back on it now, I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for that. Right? So that is why I have always lived by the notion of never being upset about the things that you don't have, and just being grateful, right, about the things that you do have, and that no matter what, with the right attitude, with the right mindset, and the can-do attitude, you can overcome anything. We're very fortunate and lucky to live today, and I most certainly am as well. So again, you put your mind to it and you can achieve anything. And that's why I do think this entire theme of this series is to really highlight that.
Talk concert in DC, 199. Media K.